welcome back to Tarot Tuesday. I'm Amy the Medium, and today I thought it'd be a really fun idea to take a deep dive look into a particular deck. And in this case, I chose this deck. Now, what is fun and hilarious about this deck, this is Leota's Mansion Tarot, created by Topher Adam, that is the artist. This deck, I'll just read the description that the author wrote. This tarot deck is fan-made and not associated in any way with the Walt Disney Company. That's interesting, isn't it? So any fans of Disney, of Disneyland, you're aware of the attraction that is the Haunted Mansion. This deck was created as an homage to that attraction. Leota is the head that is seen in the crystal ball within the ride. And so this artist decided to create a tarot deck and call it Leota's Mansion. So it is loosely based on the attraction. As it says, there is no affiliation with the Walt Disney Company. This is fan-made. It's meant for fun. But let's take a deeper look at this deck. So what's great, what I love about it, it's not a complete tarot deck. Essentially, the deck itself really is just the major arcana, but there are some additional cards that the author has created, which I think are really fun. So let's take a look at each of these pieces individually. First off, let's look at the box. Right on the box itself, the author has written, these cards are not to be taken serious. They are an interpretation of the arcana deck, but are for your enlightenment. It's funny that the author notes that because, like I always say, the cards are just a tool. Even though these are meant to be for fun and enjoyment, you still can use them for a reading if you would like. Now, looking at the art itself, the backs of the cards are super cool. This is meant to be Leota here. The coloring is very similar to the wallpaper that you see in the Haunted Mansion. Nothing is taken directly from the mansion. The author's done a really good job at making sure that this is a tribute. Some other just fun things in this deck. Here's a little card that says, thank you for purchasing my tarot deck. I've always wanted to create a deck of my own, and what better story to tell than the one we love so much about our beloved mansion. I hope you get to share these with many friends and family for years to come and into the afterlife. Signed by Topher Adam. And here's a card that he has created that is a portrait of himself, and this is also done sort of in the style of the portraits in the ride. So very clever, very creative, awesome job to Topher for creating this deck. So let's get into the cards themselves. We start off just like every other tarot deck with the Fool. In this case, it is numbered number 1. Most tarot decks start with 0 as the Fool, but you know what? We're not going to split hairs on that. If you know the ride, you know this character. This is the Keeper of the Graveyard. We move into the Magician. You see here a lovely ghost. Moving forward to the High Priestess. And we continue, the Empress, the Emperor. Each one of these cards really showcases a character within the ride, and I just think that's so clever and so wonderful. Here's the Hierophant, which this is an image of Leota herself, the little head in the floating crystal ball. We've got the Lovers, 2 ghosts in the graveyard. The Chariot, the Hermit, Strength, you get the idea. So we really do go through a lot of the cards of the major arcana. As you can tell from the artwork here though, we're not trying too hard with any symbolism. We're not trying to tie these back directly to the traditional tarot or the traditional symbols in the tarot. This really is done with the artwork in mind of the Haunted Mansion itself. So when we look at different cards here, the Moon, for example, we've got our hitchhiking ghost taking a walk. There's nothing in here really that symbolizes the moon in the same way that the traditional tarot does, but it is just a really clever way of presenting this. However, if you were going to use these cards in a reading, this artwork could inspire you for a different interpretation of this card. If I go back to the Lovers, if you take a closer look at the Lovers here, you see they are 2 ghosts that are in the mansion. The man has an axe behind his back. What is he going to do with it? I don't know. But if you look over at her, you see that she's got her arms crossed. She's holding a flower. She looks like she's in a very contemplative mood, just very into herself. She's got her back turned to her partner. So in this case, if you were going to use this Lovers card in a reading and you got this artwork and it inspired something in you, this could be quite the opposite of what you would normally interpret the Lovers to be. So in this case, you might look at this card and go, oh, you know what? You're not ready for a relationship because You're closing your eyes to the possibilities, you're turning your back to the possibilities. But you can obviously see how this version of the Lovers is so different from the Rider-Waite version of the Lovers. And so that's why I always say take the art with a grain of salt and really use these as a tool to tap into your own intuition about a situation, because these things can really lead you into very different directions. But let's talk about some of the other cards that are in this deck. So like I mentioned, we've got the major arcana for the most part. Most of the cards are there. They're mostly in the right order. But then we've got a handful of additional cards that the authors put in. So some of these are fun. This one here is called the Hatchet. Very cool. Graveyard Ghosts, which you can't have the Haunted Mansion without them. And then we've got some that are meant to inspire, perhaps? Lose Your Head. Buried Alive. The Gaze of a Stranger. We go on and on with these, but what I did want to do is just lay out a really quick spread to show how you can use a fun deck like this to actually do a reading for somebody. I'm going to shuffle them up like I would a normal reading. And actually for fun, I'm going to throw in these two cards. They're not meant to be part of the deck, but it's just to show you that if they come up in a reading, you can still use them. So I'm just going to mix those in. And I'm going to lay the cards out. All right, so right off the bat with this spread, there's a couple of things I noticed right away just by looking at the artwork and not the meanings of the cards that I'm aware with, and not even just the cards that I know of. Very first card I laid down was 3 Floating Flames. This is not a card that is part of the original tarot, so what I need to do with this card is really feel into my intuition of what this card could be trying to communicate or helping to communicate with my sitter. It's crossed with the Empress. I'm familiar with the Empress, so when I'm reading from this deck, I may fall back on the defined meanings of each of these cards, but I may also decide to use the artwork here to inspire me. I may also just not even look at them and just read for my client without even noticing there are cards on the table. But for the sake of this, let's talk about these cards. As I'm looking at this, let's assume that I'm sitting across from somebody who's trying to decide what they're going to do about their job. Whether they want to quit their corporate job and move into entrepreneurship, or whether they want to keep that comfy corporate job and give up on the idea of doing their dream. So if I were to look at this, what I'm seeing here already, I'm jumping right to the end, the Devil card, which tells us a lot of different things. But in this case, when I look at this artwork, the devil is holding something in his hand, which it's hard to tell what it says. It could say control, it could say content, it could say continuity, it could say continue, who knows? It's hard to see what's in there, but it is up for interpretation. And this card right off the bat, if I saw this and someone was saying, you know, do I want to change things? I would say, well, you know what? The temptation is really to stay the same. It's really to stay where you're at. It's a lot easier, but you will feel like you are out of control in your life, that someone else is controlling you. So yes, right now you're leaning towards staying where you are, but I don't see a contentment in that. That's one way that this could go. But I could also go back and go, you know what? I'm seeing this portrait here. This to me is somebody who you haven't yet met, who can really help you with this situation and help you to make this change and move forward into entrepreneurship. We've also got the Death card here. So, you know, as we know, death can mean the end of something, but also a rebirth. So this may be pointing to that change that this person is interested in, if one thing ends and another begins. In this case, because we're looking at the Haunted Mansion, you can see that behind death on this card, we've got 2 columns with lanterns on the top of them, but the columns themselves are kind of bent towards death. This can imply sort of that structure falling. A lot of times when we see columns in the tarot, it does represent structure and stability. So to see them falling means things falling apart. We also see that death has a big old smile on his face here too. So that can also inform us as to what energy is coming through from our clients in this reading. So you can really take the art, even though it's meant to be cute and fun, you can really take it and work with it within your readings. So there are many different ways that you can interpret these cards, many different ways you can work with them, still understanding the foundation of the tarot, the foundation of the meaning of the cards that you've already learned from the Rider-Waite deck or from other sources. So I really just wanted to give this example of a fun, different deck that you could work with, different ways to use it, similar ways to use it, but also to let you know that there really are no limits as to what you can use in a reading, whether it has to be a complete deck, whether there have been books written about it or not. That's really not the case. You can use whatever works for you. So if you really like this deck, Leota's Mansion Tarot, I'll put a link in the description where you can purchase this. It's still available. I don't know for how long it will be available. I don't know if it's a limited edition or not, but I'll certainly put a link in the description. And that is really it for this week's Tarot Tuesday. If you have a deck that you'd like me to profile or look at closer, please let me know in the comments. Otherwise, I hope you've enjoyed this fun little detour that we've taken through the Haunted Mansion world. Take care and have a great rest of your week. We'll see you next time.